Welcome to Generations, a show which helps people 50 and better lead happy, healthy, and productive lives. Hosted today by Nadia Jordana, and here's Nadia.
Hello, and welcome to the classic edition of Generations. I'm Nadia Jordana, and co-hosting with me today, the ever-lovely Diane Winkler. Hi, Diane.
Hi, and thank you for the compliment.
And I have a guest co-host today, Catherine Kelly. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, and it's so nice to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for being here. We have a very interesting guest today, David Lapakko. And David, you are the Associate Professor of Speech at Augsburg College. Did I get that correctly?
Well, yeah, these days we call it Communication Studies, but in the old days we called it Speech.
Okay, now that makes sense to me. And you have recently won a competition called The World's Greatest Thinker.
Well, it's called the Great American Think-Off.
Great American Thinker, okay. And then the title is The World's Greatest Thinker.
Just America's Greatest Thinker.
America's Greatest Thinker. I'm giving you a greater audience than was given to you at the contest.
Yes.
Well, tell us a little bit about how that all got started.
Well, there's a man named John Davis who was affiliated with the New York Mills Cultural Center. He wanted to bring something to that area which sort of elevated the level of discourse, and he came up with this idea of the Great American Think-Off, which was this year in its 23rd year. And on January 1st every year they announce a topic question for the year, and then anybody can write an essay no longer than 750 words and submit it by April 1st. So they get hundreds of essays from really all over the country, sometimes other nations too. And they pick the top 4 essays, and those people are invited to come up to New York Mills in the middle of June and sort of, we'll say, debate each other, you know, in a kind of a question-answer format in the high school auditorium with a few hundred people who are the ultimate voters. And so they choose a winner out of the 4 finalists, and this year I was lucky enough to be the winner, and they do call the winner America's Greatest Thinker, although I think we all know I'm probably not America's Greatest Thinker, but it's kind of a fun title. Actually, I get razzed about it more than anything else, so for good reason too.
So they take the two sides of the subject and they pit them against each other for a first round. Is that correct?
Well, actually what they do is they take the two who are on the same side and put them against each other in sort of like the semifinals.
Yeah.
So I first entered this competition in 2013. That year the question was, what's more ethical, sticking to our principles or being willing to compromise? And I was a finalist, but I didn't win. But I kind of lost in the semifinals up there. And then last year, I thought I wrote maybe my best essay, but I didn't get invited up. The question was, love or hate, which motivates us more?
Oh my goodness.
And then this year, it was, does technology free us or trap us? And so I just decided that it was more in keeping for me to write the case that it frees us, and so I was lucky enough to be invited up, and then I went against the other person, a guy from North Carolina, who had also written an essay that technology frees us. And then we read our essays, the moderator did some question and answers, and then the audience votes as to who deserves to go to the final.
Oh, how exciting.
Against the better of the technology traps us essays.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic subject, don't you think so?
Oh my gosh. But now tell me about the audience. How are they allowed in? 200 are there, and how do they get there?
They buy a ticket for, I think, $12 if they buy ahead of time, or $14 if they at the door. They tend to be a bit older. They tend to be from that area, although there were some, I talked afterwards, that they have a reception afterwards. There were some college students who came up just because they were interested in showing up, which I thought was very sweet. But
So you don't have to be from the town?
No, you just have to buy a ticket.
This is a pretty general audience that you're dealing with then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to know, hard to read the audience, except you can kind of tell they're older, and you have to figure some of them have sort of a rural background. That's part of the reason why I started my essay with a farming example. I thought, this is not the Twin Cities, this is up north, and if I start with talking about how technology has changed farming, maybe that's a way to begin the essay. And when they set the criteria for the essays, they do not want a heavily academic paper. They want something where you're speaking to your own experiences, your own point of view. They don't want something that looks like a school assignment. So you have to keep that in mind as well.
It was a good read. I felt like you were speaking directly to me in the essay. So yeah, I think you accomplished that.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's really not so much the Great American Think-Off as the Great American Write-Off, meaning you have to write something that's interesting enough and memorable enough that it gets their attention up there.
Right.
And this year they had a panel, I think, of 9 judges, all of whom were sorting through these hundreds of essays.
Yeah.
So you better not have a gray essay. You know, it has to have something distinctive about it.
Okay.
And each time I've entered, I've tried to do a little bit of that.
Okay.
It's still a mystery as to, you know, how they decide who should be invited, but I'm just happy that I made it again.
Good for you.
I have an idea of what I think might have pulled you out as an unusual thinker. But tell me, what did you decide would hold you in kind of a spotlight that would be memorable? What was it you were trying to get them to hold on to?
Well, I started right from the very first paragraph. So the very first paragraph is just one short sentence. Imagine a world without technology, period. So I wanted to have an intro that sort of caught their attention. Then I said, well, actually, second paragraph, if you lived in the 1800s, you wouldn't have to imagine it.
That's right.
Think about plowing a field, making a meal, all, you know, visiting a friend, and all the things you would have to do without the aid of technology. And so I kind of used that historical framework as a way to think about whether or not technology is really such an awful thing. Because I know from the gut, people often think, oh, technology is so annoying. But most of us have never had to experience life without it.
Yeah.
We actually had a power failure in Richfield last night for 38 minutes. And a half hour without electricity, you sort of feel like your whole life is in turmoil. So I mean, I think most people, if they're honest about it, realize that there are some annoying parts of technology, but that they wouldn't want to not have it. And that was part of the, you know, one of the things I taunted my opponent in the finals, a guy named Paul Terry from Waconia, Minnesota, very nice man, very capable, and had won this event 2 years ago. I said, Paul, I really care about you and I like you, and so if there's any technology where you feel trapped by it, please just give it over to me. I'll be happy to take care of it for you. The audience sort of liked that, and I was just trying to make the point that as much as we may hate technology, we would not want to part with it. And the other thing was that a lot of the technology traps us arguments were based around computers, which is not surprising. But one of the things I kept trying to say is, if we're really talking about technology, computers are just one part of technology.
And I thought those stories that you introduced, the small one, that were very memorable and made you kind of see a picture like
That's
you
right.
without a dishwasher, and then beginning and liking it, and that feeling of soap on your hands and all those things for a while.
I thought that was wonderful.
Very short while.
No, it's a crapshoot. You send it out there, you cross your fingers, you hope somebody notices, but it's hard to know.
And once you've been given this title, is there anything that happens after that, or do you just enjoy it?
I think you just enjoy the title. I mean, for that weekend up in this town of 1,200 people, you're sort of like royalty, which is very bizarre. They pull you around town in a tractor-drawn hay wagon to kind of promote the thing. And they give you a gift bag with a refrigerator magnet, a T-shirt, a thermos, 1 pound of Think-Off coffee, a Think-Off T-shirt, and then you win a medal, and there's cash too. You win some money for being a finalist. But so it's afterwards, I don't know that anything happens. The website sort of stays where it is up there for the whole year, and so until next June, I'm still America's greatest thinker. Although if I am, America is in deep trouble, I think.
I don't think so. No way.
Well, I think it gets people going in and gets people thinking. That's the thing.
Well, you know, one of the really kind of sweet things about it, and you think of all the emphasis we put on NCAA Final Four basketball tournament, the Super Bowl, or the big game, I guess we have to call it, and these kind of events are few and far between. I don't know of anything like it. And one of the really nice things is that during that weekend, people who are in the area talk about it a lot. They talk about it before, during, and after. There's a reception after. People talk about it. People are talking with each other about technology, and it really does promote a kind of discourse that wouldn't happen otherwise. I think it's a very charming sort of event. Initially, it seems a little weird to go up there. Everything's kind of small town and not particularly elegant or anything. But by the time you're done, you just say, what a wonderful weekend. What a great thing that they're doing up there.
Was the audience primarily for or against, and I don't know if that's the right word, but pro-technology or less so?
That is a really interesting question, and they don't do any survey or anything, but I can tell you that several people came up to me afterwards and said, you know, when I walked into the auditorium before the event, I was ready to say that technology traps us. And after hearing all of the arguments, I decided maybe it doesn't. And I thought that was as nice a compliment as you could get. But obviously the whatever biases people have coming in are going to enter in. You hope they don't enter in too much. I mean, last year, clearly I think that love doesn't motivate quite as well as fear does. And so my essay last year was about fear. I mean, I love love. I'm all for love. But, you know, fear can make people do all sorts of things. It's a very intense sort of visceral emotion that we have. And nonetheless, the winner last year happened to be an ELCA Lutheran minister who argued that love motivates more than fear. And I think people wanted really to believe that love trumps fear. I think even in some ways this year, people didn't want to believe that they were trapped by technology. The people who argued that technology traps us sort of had, I'd call it a dystopian vision of things, that you know, Big Brother taking over, people being oppressed and, you know, imprisoned, and I think a lot of people were reluctant to go that far and say that I'm a victim of technology, and I think that did probably work in my favor a little bit.
I would say definitely, but I want to know, because we use such a small portion of our brain, I want to know when we're going to get going on the rest of it. Because I do not have a computer and I don't want one. My husband and I, after we retired, just said, no way. And I was much happier by not having that, because our children all had them and they were always in getting fixed all the time. So if I wanted something, I would just go to them, present this, and I say, well, okay, will you help me out with this? And that was fine, but I want no part of it, and I'm not a backwards person, I don't think.
But she may argue well for being trapped by technology.
That's right.
At least that piece of technology. I think you were very wise to make it broader than the computer.
Yeah, well, you kind of, I mean, I anticipated that the best arguments, certainly when I think of my own life and being trapped by technology, computers would probably be at the top of the list. They were supposed to save us time and labor, but as you and I both know, they wind up, we spend more time and more energy maintaining email accounts and going through websites and all the things that we have to do in order to just get through the day. So I think the computer part is a very vulnerable point.
I do too.
And that's part of the reason why I kind of said to the audience, remember the wording of the question. It doesn't say computers, it says technology. So let's talk about health technology, transportation technology, cooking technology, educational technology, and so on and so forth, and not just focus on computers, because if you do, it makes my case a bit weaker, a little more difficult.
We forget about, we're so used to, some of the other technologies are so much older, we're so used to them that we don't think of them as technology anymore. Transportation, health technology, cooking technology, to me that's not technology, that's a necessity.
And of course, one issue that didn't come up was how would we even define technology, and that would be an interesting question in itself. But even something as basic as the automobile, one thing I said in that final round, our daughter, when she turned 16, she was a pretty good math student, but for her the equation was really pretty simple. Car equals freedom. And so things that we take for granted that enable us to do things we couldn't do otherwise. You know, I mentioned in the essay that after I left college, I had never been out of the country, so I just booked a flight to Spain. You know, how liberating is that? To be able to do that. So,
very much so.
And it wouldn't take you an entire week to get there.
No, that's true, as you stated. Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
And you'd be depending on certain technologies along the way for that entire.
You know what I like a lot about your essay is that in academics we tend to be very, well, we make things that could be clearer kind of foggy. And in this case, you did such a beautiful job, I think, of saying some very clear and simple things with a very memorable style and manner. But we call it audience analysis. I think audience analysis is at the basis of everything. How I talk to you, how you write this, how we interact interculturally, anything. But speak more to the idea of that analysis process and how you see it on a daily basis even.
Yeah, well, I mean, 2 years ago when I made the finals, I basically went up there just to talk about the subject. And the audience in the auditorium was kind of in the back of my mind. And I think it's part of the reason why I didn't win that semifinal round, because I was from the old, you know, I debated in high school and college, and there everything is about content. It's not really about adapting to the audience, it's making good arguments. So I thought, well, if I make good arguments, then I will be rewarded with a win. Well, that was short-sighted. So this time around, I really tried to pay much more attention to the audience and what they would be concerned about and thinking about in the process of being a part of this event. At one point I even directly asked the audience, how many of you have a Facebook account? How many of you have a Twitter account? Because I wanted to demonstrate with hands that not everybody even uses technology, much less is trapped by technology. And I think that sort of approach really helped a lot, because I became much more aware that, after all, those were the people who were voting to begin with.
Absolutely.
And secondly, I think they felt like they were participating more and not just observing.
Well, every year I do shows at the Science Museum in St. Paul. And there's 4 of us, and what we do is we teach kids all about the free things, the safe things, about the Winter Carnival. Because I came up with this idea about 7 or 8 years ago and said, we've got so many children that don't know what the Winter Carnival is about. So why don't we just ease them into the fun things? And that's what we do. Well, when we are finished with our about 20-minute speech, and we do 2 shows back to back, and we always get 1 question from anybody. We have about a 4-minute to open up to see if anybody had any questions. And someone invariably gets up and says, how old are you?
A very important question.
We get it all the time. And we do tell them the truth, and then they go, really? So I know what you're saying, and I feel, you know, with an audience, what you're getting from it, from the kids, and what their outlooks are. And I love this. I love doing it every year. And it just makes me feel like, hey, we are really doing something for kids to pull them into the Winter Carnival.
And it is a good form of communication.
It is.
If there's, especially when you answer their question, if they're sitting there thinking and wondering about that, they're not as apt to be listening to the exciting information you're giving them.
Right. And
You know, I think that's a beautiful kind of lead into talking about the difference between the audience analysis and delivery. Because I think David would be not focused on delivery necessarily, because we are so often kind of razzled and dazzled with the tap dance, then we don't look at that content, which historically all these academic kind of things have happened. But in your case, you said, okay, my audience is children.
that's right.
And what's in it for them?
Yeah.
That's
What
the
draws
reason.
them
That's my
in?
reason.
What speaks their language and makes the points I want to make, but using their kind of background? And that's what I think you did beautifully.
I do too.
And I think your delivery is always important, but the fact that people will perhaps sometimes give more credence to delivery than they do to the ideas and the information you're trying to give is very important.
In some ways, what starts as the Great American Write-Off, because you need to write the essay it's good enough that they'll notice it. When you get up there, it becomes the Great American Speak-Off.
Yeah.
And so now you have to find a way to connect with people in oral communication. And sometimes some of that stuff is very basic. Unfortunately for the guy I was against in the semifinals, the guy from North Carolina, David Eckel is his name, very nice man, very smart, but he is not a gifted speaker by any means. And part of the problem he had was that about every other word that he said when he read his essay, he'd move his mouth away from the microphone, and people could not hear every word of the essay. Well, I was the one reading second, and I thought, oh my God, I think I've already got this half won. All I've got to do is make sure that I keep my mouth on the microphone.
And I don't do what he, yes.
Yeah, and he's kind of a low-key kind of person. He would be good in a smaller room, but this is a big auditorium, and so you have to adapt a little bit to that, and I don't think he did a very good job of doing that, and so I think he paid the price for that. I mean, it made it easier for me.
And that's all part of effective communication, which is what this is all based upon, is effective communication.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's ironic is that some of these things are pretty simple, but you can be the smartest person in the world, and again, there is some greatest American thinker out there, and it's not me, but they have to be able to articulate these ideas both in writing and orally in a way that will resonate with people, and that's difficult. It's difficult for a lot of people in general, difficult for people in the sciences, for example. At Augsburg, we have a special public speaking course, scientific and technical speaking, and all of the physics and chemistry majors take that because they're not equipped to talk about what they do. They're very bright, and they know a lot of stuff, but they can't explain it or share it or talk about it with other people. And so we have a special section of our public speaking course that enables those people to get a little bit of experience.
Yeah. This is kind of a sneaky way to get something in, but I think that there's such a balancing act between, you know, the content and then that audience analysis and then the delivery or what kinds of things you're trying to do. But Dave debunked a myth that goes around, and I'd like you to just talk a little bit about, I love the fact that you took a very sort of tried and true article in our discipline that says 90% of all communication is nonverbal. Well, he and I are both interested in rhetoric. We think words are really important. But he wanted to look at, like, where is this all coming from? Tell him a little bit about what you did, because it was very interesting. He debunked the myth.
Well, there was a study, one study, done in 1967 by a man named Albert Mehrabian from UCLA, who's very well known in the field of psychology, but he's been cited a lot in our field. And along with a woman named Susan Ferris, they did a study trying to determine what % of meaning and communication is verbal and what % is nonverbal. But the study involved just 37 women, psychology majors from UCLA. All they were exposed to was one word, the word maybe. And then that was paired with either a photo of someone looking, happy, neutral, or angry, or an audio tape of the person saying the word maybe in different tones of voice. And then they asked these 37 women, on what basis would you determine what their emotions are? Would it be from their language, from their facial expression, or from their tone of voice? Well, they only had one word to go from. So it was sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that they would either have to say, well, it was the look on their face or it was the sound of their voice.
For me.
But it was, and so out of this, the figures 7% verbal, 38% vocal, and 55% facial became almost like a dogma that people just, they worship these numbers because they sounded so precise. They must be right. Even Dr. Phil used these numbers on national TV when he was talking to Larry King, and it was about that point I said, I've got to write to Dr. Phil and say, you're wrong about this. I actually got a response.
Oh, no, you did?
Yeah.
What did they say in
Well,
response?
it was interesting because I got an email and a voicemail within 24 hours, and they said, would you like to debate Dr. Phil on the air? And I said, well, sure. And well, can you send us a digital photo? And could you fly to Los Angeles on such and such a date?
At your expense.
Well, I don't know. And I said yes to all those things, but then it just kind of fell apart. There was obviously some production meeting where they just decided they weren't going to do that. But they at least noticed. And every once in a while somebody notices. If you look at in the Wikipedia section on nonverbal communication, there's a little sentence that says, as David Lapakko has clearly demonstrated, these numbers are misleading. So, but everyone out there, there's tons of people. It's amazing how many places you can find those numbers. And some people don't even know where they came from, but they're so precise they figure that must be the case. But I think we realize that language does matter.
Major.
So if I say, you know, you're a total idiot, what percentage of that is nonverbal?
Yeah.
It's the words that you use, or
And
you're the
yeah.
loveliest woman I've ever
They
met.
deliver.
That the words are going to carry so
words
much
are
of the
right
meaning,
there.
and you
Yeah.
really can't, in the end, boil it down to a specific percentage. I mean, I think
really
it's
can't.
futile
Yeah.
to even try and do that.
It ends up being a combination of things.
Yeah, it always
And that
is.
differs from person to person.
And from situation to
does.
situation.
Yeah, but some people have taken this like across the board.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter
man.
what's going on. It's 7% verbal and 93% nonverbal. Well,
Yep.
that's ridiculous.
But I watch body English.
We all
and
do.
you should.
That's what I do.
We all do. But we don't do it to the exclusion of language.
No, we
Yeah.
don't.
We do it in
don't.
conjunction with the
Definitely.
language.
It's a package,
Definitely.
yeah.
Well, and communication is such a variety of different things, and it, like I said, it's different from person to person. Some people are audio oriented. Some people, like me, are more visually, and it just depends on what that person resonates to, and then what the communicator is doing.
And I think
That's
we've
right.
always thought that it's way more complex than being able to give percentages and have it across the board, that that's the way it is.
But percentages
yes.
and numbers are nice when you're giving a speech to kind of hold those
Makes you
up
feel like
there.
you really know something too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you do know something.
Well, yeah, but the numbers don't make it so. You know, I
they
think that
don't.
you just
They
really have
don't.
to. This balancing of realizing too, when you go to present your information to an audience, that they are not simply listening to your words.
That's right.
They are reading your body language, and
they
they
are.
are responding to the look of you. That's not to be denied. That is strong. But to think that we could ever across the board say one is more important. You got the win or to be invited because of the words on the page too.
It's all part
Very
of
true.
the
It's
effective
just a
communication.
balance.
Yeah.
Yes, it
it's a
is.
whole. It's a
Yeah.
holistic.
And of
It
course,
really
if
is.
the meaning in communication was 93%
We're-
nonverbal, we wouldn't even have to learn a language. We could just,
Yeah,
I don't think we could do that.
we could. We're running out of time, but before we go, we have something that we wanted to present to
Oh, my
you,
goodness.
David. Thank you,
Wow.
Mike. And just in honor of your accomplishment,
geez.
Well,
Oh, how
nice.
sweet.
America's greatest thinker.
Oh, that's
Very
wonderful.
You'll have to wear that forever.
You'll be able to wear that for sure in New York Mills and try it in New York
Yes,
City and
yes.
see what happens.
Well, see, this is a terrible yoke to bear because now that I have this title, people razz me as much as they say congratulations. And of course, if I do anything that's klutzy or
Sure.
you know, I misjudge something, I thought you were America's greatest thinker. It's like, oh,
Well, I want
There's a lot to live
yeah.
up to.
I
Yes, well,
want to
that's the
put
problem.
S in
It's
front
the-
of that
Thank you
word.
all for being here, and thank you for watching Generations.